Welcome to World at Work TV. I'm Terry Hsu. Today we're going to be talking about the art and science of quota setting. And joining me today are Mark Donnolo, he's managing partner of SalesGlobe, and also Jill Merken, Vice President of Global Sales Operations at Gemalto Incorporated. Let's start off first. So the art and science, I get the impression that among sales comp designers out there, there seems to be a little bit more competency on the science portion, the setting and the numbers and so forth. While on the art side, maybe there could be some improvements. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, when we look at quota setting, what we tend to see is people focused on the numbers. That tends to be the thing that comes up the first. And it's a lot like sales compensation. We go for our calculators, we figure out how much we're going to increase somebody's goal for the next year and how we're going to justify that. And what we find in our research is that a lot of the issues we run into on quota setting are trying to deal with fixing the numbers, but not really fixing the real problem, which is the process and the people. And process and people is not science. Process and people really is the art piece. So a lot of these situations we run into, people don't understand how their quotas are set. There isn't, it doesn't really, they don't have a process that exists. So what we try to do is connect the people to the process. So what you have to do is you have to start with the sales managers and work all the way down to the sales reps and make sure that you're not only designing the right process, but also communicating that really clearly.
That's probably one of the biggest issues we see in the field is sales reps. We spend a lot of time in sales operations and in the corporation sharing with product line management, with finance, with marketing, with all the executive teams and HR. And you do all of that, and yet no one takes the time to spend it to the person who actually gets it. So if you're talking as a sales rep to a product line management person, the product guy says, oh, you've got this kind of growth, you've got this, and the sales rep goes, I don't know, I just got a big number. I just got a big number, right? That's all they care about. And they said, we don't know how it comes about. And then they ask the manager, and sometimes sales management doesn't know either. So a lot of best practices is taking that and, SalesGlobe calls it a campaign, which is exactly what it is. Just like any other marketing campaign, you should be taking that campaign and driving it down to your sales organization and making sure everybody understands both the art and the science of where that quota comes from.
Right. So in terms of these these issues that you brought up, in your experience, what are some of the broad level strategies that you've seen to try to kind of effectuate and help clients and within your group kind of go down the right path and make the right decisions?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. I think it's the right methodology for the right type of market, and I think it's also increasing competency or education. So if you go to the right methodology, what I mean by that is if we look at what most companies do, they use some form of historic quota setting method. So they're just basically looking at the past and they're trying to predict the future with that. So there are different methodologies that can make adjustments to the history by looking forward and looking at things like relative market share or looking at competitive intensity of the market, et cetera. Different methodologies where you can start to build up from the pipeline. So fixing the right or finding the right methodology for the right situation is, I think, a really important point. The other one is around competency, and so it's building the competency of the organization, training the organization on how to do quota setting. So it's not enough to just give people the number, it's not enough to just give people the process. What you need to do is actually teach them to become owners and educated about that process so they can operate it and they can make really informed decisions. So that might involve training, workshops, that type of thing. So you're really building a capability in your organization that can develop and improve over the years.
One of the key factors of that is critical. It's very critical to do that, go through the whole process, and probably the key deliverables is the company uses it, right? We've gone through this many times and then the company just says, nope, we really want to go with this. And that's when it kind of all falls apart. So again, getting that buy-in up front, that this is the right process and sticking to it is critical for the success of the whole program.
When we're sort of talking, sitting together talking about this, it makes perfect sense, and you can say, yeah, absolutely, that makes perfect sense. In the real world, though, you see, for reason X, Y, or Z, or maybe it's X, Y, and Z, things go a little south. So any advice for maybe the newer practitioners out there, what are some ways that they can actually make that happen and not get sidetracked or have things go not the way that was intended?
But I'm sure, there's a good practice, and I'll let the best practice talk last, but I think it goes back to the credibility of getting the buy-in up front, understanding from your leadership what is the process we're going to use, and we're going to stick to it. So we are all committed to that practice, because again, if you get everyone involved and you get everyone educated, and then it's pretty much for, it's not going to be used, is not the right way, because then you've demoted everyone for a lot of reasons. So again, best practice.
Well, I think there's a different than quota setting than we run into on sales compensation. So you have to work with probably a team that's led by finance in quota setting, which is very different than compensation, which is usually led by sales or sales operations or HR. So you've got to recognize that different dynamic. The other thing is take it slowly. So we talk about a lot of different methodologies. What I would do is start kind of stepwise and take incremental steps in terms of improving the process. So if you look at benchmarks, we're trying to get to a place where the organization, we have about maybe 50 to 70% of people achieving goal or at quota or above. We're not going to get there in one step. We're also not going to get to really data-intensive methods in one step, nor are they going to be scalable. So what I recommend is starting with something, say a historic process, and starting to build on that with different ways of looking at the future. So we could do that in terms of market modifiers like we had talked about before. We could do it by taking historic growth rates and then starting to look at future growth rates and blending those together. We can do it by doing pipeline builds. It's all information that we have. So before we get into heavy analytics, let's take some first steps, start to build the confidence of the organization, and also build the confidence of that team, which is a little bit different than the sales comp team.
Well, that's absolutely excellent information. I appreciate your time. Mark and Jill, thanks for joining us. For World at Work TV, I'm Kerry Shue.